It started with a spark, a single forgotten ember in a baker's oven on a quiet London street. But this was no ordinary spark. This was the breath of a dragon, waiting to be unleashed upon a city built of timber and tar, a city sleeping, unaware that it was about to be devoured by a sea of fire. Before the sun would rise again, this tiny glow would become a roaring monster, erasing 1,000 years of history and forging a new city from the ashes. This is the story of how London burned. Welcome to Echoes of Time. The year is 1666. London is a labyrinth of narrow, winding streets, a chaotic tapestry of human life. It's a city of contrasts, where immense wealth sits beside crushing poverty. The buildings, mostly medieval in design, lean against each other for support, their timber frames and thatched roofs creating a tinderbox just waiting for a flame. Sanitation is almost non-existent. The streets are filled with refuse, and the River Thames is a murky soup of waste. Yet this is the heart of England, a bustling hub of commerce, politics, and culture. More than 300,000 souls are packed within and around its ancient Roman walls. The city had just endured a devastating plague the year before, a great plague that had stolen nearly a quarter of its population. The survivors, though weary, were returning to their lives, hoping for a peaceful recovery. The summer had been long, hot, and dry, leaving the wooden structures of the city dangerously brittle. In the early hours of Sunday, September 2nd, in a small bakery on Pudding Lane owned by Thomas Farriner, that long-awaited peace would come to a fiery end. A simple mistake, a failure to properly extinguish the oven's embers, would set the stage for one of the most infamous disasters in urban history. The fire began just after midnight. A servant, smelling smoke, was the first to raise the alarm. But the Farriner family, trapped upstairs, could only escape by climbing out a window and onto a neighbor's roof. One maid, too afraid to make the jump, became the fire's first victim. At first, the blaze seemed manageable. The Lord Mayor, Sir Thomas Bloodworth, was woken and brought to the scene. Famously, he dismissed the fire with a contemptuous remark, claiming a woman could put it out with a bucket of water, and went back to bed. It was a catastrophic misjudgment. Fanned by a strong easterly wind, the embers leaped from rooftop to rooftop. The dry timber of the houses acted like kindling. The fire quickly spread from Pudding Lane, consuming warehouses along the Thames filled with flammable goods like oil, tallow, and spirits. The city's firefighting methods were primitive bucket brigades, and crude water pumps were no match for the inferno. The standard procedure was to create fire breaks by demolishing houses in the fire's path with hooks and gunpowder. But the Lord Mayor hesitated, fearing the cost of rebuilding. His indecision allowed the fire to become an unstoppable monster. By Sunday morning, the fire was a raging torrent of flame, turning the sky orange and raining down ash. Panic gripped the city. Citizens fled, clogging the streets with carts piled high with their worldly possessions, trying to reach the river or escape through the city gates. The sound was a terrifying symphony, the roar of the flames, the crash of falling buildings, and the screams of the desperate. Samuel Pepys, a naval administrator who kept a detailed diary, watched the disaster unfold from the Tower of London. He wrote, "An entire arch of fire from this to the other side of the bridge, and in a bow up the hill for an arch of about a mile long. It made me weep to see it." He rushed to the king, Charles II, to report the city's dire situation. The king, unlike the mayor, took decisive action. He put his brother, the Duke of York, in charge of firefighting efforts and ordered the demolition of buildings to create fire breaks. But by then, the fire had a mind of its own. For 3 more days, it raged. It consumed St. Paul's Cathedral, its massive stone walls exploding from the intense heat, and its molten lead roof flowing like a river of silver through the streets. It destroyed the Royal Exchange, the Guildhall, and over 13,000 homes. The heat was so intense it melted the iron chains on the city gates. London, The great medieval city was being erased from the map. But here's the twist. For all its terrifying destruction, the Great Fire of London had a surprisingly low official death toll, recorded at just 6 people. How can a fire that destroyed 80% of the city kill so few? For centuries, this was accepted as fact. But modern historians and archaeologists question this figure. They argue that the heat of the fire was so intense, over 1,000 degrees Celsius, that it could have completely cremated bodies, leaving no bones behind. Furthermore, the poor, the elderly, and the infirm, unable to escape the rapidly moving flames, were likely uncounted. Their deaths would have gone unrecorded in the chaos, their remains lost forever in the rubble and ash. The official count likely only included those of a certain social standing. The true number of victims may have been in the hundreds or even thousands, a hidden human cost buried beneath the official narrative of a city miraculously spared of mass casualties. The fire wasn't just a tragedy of property. It was a silent, unrecorded massacre. From the smoldering ruins, a new London began to rise. The fire, in all its devastation, had created a blank slate. Visionary architects like Sir Christopher Wren were given a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to redesign the city. Though Wren's grandest plans for wide boulevards and piazzas were largely rejected in favor of rebuilding along the old street plans, his influence is undeniable. He personally oversaw the rebuilding of over 50 churches, including his masterpiece, a new St. Paul's Cathedral with its iconic dome that would define London's skyline for centuries. Building regulations were transformed. New houses were mandated to be built of brick and stone, not wood, and streets were made wider. The fire also had an unexpected silver lining. It effectively sterilized the city, burning away the filth and the rats that carried the plague. The Great Plague never returned to London with the same ferocity. The disaster spurred the creation of the world's first property insurance companies, a concept born from the ashes. The fire reshaped not just the physical city, but its very soul, forging a more resilient, modern metropolis. The Great Fire of London was more than a disaster. It was a violent rebirth. It taught a brutal lesson about the fragility of our world and the power of renewal. The echoes of those 4 days in 1666 still resonate in the brickwork of the modern city, a permanent reminder that even from the most complete destruction, something new and enduring can be born. Thanks for joining us on Echoes of Time. Subscribe for more stories that history tried to forget.